and today's session will be shared by Avi and myself. I'll do the first part, then Avi will come in with his slides, and then we'll open it up in the third part to your questions, and we want to have quite a vibrant discussion here, so hopefully that will be helpful for you and a chance to really ask questions. Let's start with this sentence, which I'd like to use to frame this session and in general your application journey. Who can read this out to us? Patricia, can I volunteer you? What does this sentence say? What can you see here?
Opportunity is nowhere.
Does anyone disagree? Does anyone see anything else here? Feel free to open your mic.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. So you said opportunity is nowhere. Does anyone disagree? And can anyone see anything else written here? It's not a trick question.
I remember last time you said opportunity is now here.
Hi, Jyoti.
Hi.
You're cheating because I was your teacher at UWC, so you remember this. All right, so, and you remember it from last session, so we're going through a few of the slides, that's true. So I like to look at it through the prism of opportunity is now here, and my message with that is that in this process of applying to graduate school and scholarships, which is a bit of a rabbit hole, and it can become quite tough and complex, you never know where that piece of wisdom will come from or that key to a successful application will land from. So you really need to be open to gaining as much information and advice and tips as you can. So it's a good idea to record and write down perhaps some of the things you learned today or that stick with you, and you can take them further in your actual application journey. So let's set that as the tone for this prep session. I want to tell you a bit about my own application journey to establish some credibility and give you a sense of the kind of things I've done in the application world before founding Application Shine, whose aim is really to make opportunities more accessible and help people live life to the fullest, achieve their dreams, and apply successfully both in the academic track and in the professional job track. So from a very young age, from 14, I applied to various programs and scholarships, leadership type programs. The first was Seeds of Peace, which really changed my life. I learned Arabic and met people from all around the Middle East. And that really shaped kind of my path in the peace building world for several years, professionally as well, and opened me up to international relations and wanting to meet people from different countries and cultures and interact with them. I pursued this further through doing my high school last 2 years at United World Colleges in Norway on a full scholarship. Again, a very competitive application. I eventually became a teacher at UWC in India. Some of my students are online or were online last time, and I worked with them to submit successful applications to undergrad opportunities and scholarships. I did my own undergrad at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem in international relations. I came first in my year, worked very hard academically, and along the way, I did a few other programs on scholarships, such as the Ford Fellowship in New York, which was for social entrepreneurs, again, required a competitive application. And then I decided to do a master's degree in 2010. I chose to do an MBA with a very social mission, so it was a bit of a rare combination. I wanted to come back to Israel and impact the peace building space, but in a way that would be more effective through the business kind of language thinking network. And for that, I won the Chevening Scholarship, which I'll talk about soon, which is part of the UK Foreign Office's scholarship money. And I also won the Gates Cambridge Scholarship and ended up pursuing that one instead. It was a fuller scholarship to do my MBA at Cambridge University. I came back to Israel. I became CEO of an organization called MEET, which bridges between Israeli and Palestinian excelling youth through the use of technology and entrepreneurship. It's an educational program with MIT. I also have a professional hat in a wonderful organization in the health tech space called 8400 today. And all of this I do in parallel to helping people like you apply successfully to their most competitive opportunities, again, jobs and of course academic ones, scholarships, programs from undergrad to postdoc. And that's with Application Shine that I founded a few years ago. So with all this experience, I want to give and share with you today a few of the tips I've gathered along the way through my own journey and through helping others in theirs. And we'll start with that, with giving you an overview of the application landscape for graduate school and some major tips. Again, we can't cover everything in such a short time, but I'll do my best to give you some highlights. Then Avi will take over and chime in with important information and key tips for how to ace those dreaded tests you have to do for grad school, Gmat, GRE, etc. He'll talk about that. And then we want to leave time for Q&A. We were supposed to have spotlights with other people who've been accepted to some of the major scholarships out there for grad school, but they couldn't make this new time, and unfortunately, but we decided to go ahead anyway so as not to postpone again. So next year for that. All right. Facts and figures, just to, again, give you a sense of how competitive the landscape is. Less than 10% get accepted to the really top tier schools and scholarships. Okay, so we're talking a various range. For some places, it's up to 15, maybe 18%, but typically we're talking under 10%, so very, very competitive landscape. It's a costly endeavor. Okay, so in the US, we're typically talking for a master's degree anywhere between 120 and 150,000 over 2 years, and then in the UK around half of that. So that's a big difference between the UK and the US. Most degrees for grad school for masters in the UK are a year versus 2 years in the US. You can find programs in the US that have a 1 year length, such as the Master's in Public Administration at the Harvard Kennedy School, on the Wexner Scholarship, for instance. So it depends, but by and large, that's a key difference in terms of price, in terms of length of the program. And lastly, I want to ask you, how many seconds do you think you get for the admissions committee to scan your CV, i.e. not to read word by word, which I probably won't do at the beginning, to just decide whether to continue reading? How many seconds do you get? This is true also for HR, based on research. Any guesses? Anyone remember from, I don't know if we got to this point before the siren hit last time, but anyone remember or can guess?
5 seconds, maybe? I don't know.
Okay, so we're talking around 6 seconds, which means very little time to make a very positive first impression, which means, my friends, you got to be strategic. Okay, so we need to be very competitive and strategic in how we approach the various application components. The CV is part of the package. The 4 things I'm going to talk about in the short time I have left for my part of the presentation is, first of all, what it takes to be a successful applicant. So if you sort of look at across the board, the key major scholarships out there, the top tier universities and the programs they run, what are they looking for? If I had to sort of decide on a common denominator, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the timeline for applying, what you actually need to submit, the package, and a few words about major scholarships out there. What does it take? I think this is where we ended off last time. It's now coming back to me before we started to hear the siren. So when we look at key scholarship programs, which I'll mention soon, such as Gates, such as Fulbright, we'll talk about them, or when we look at top tier, the top 10 universities, Ivy League schools in the US, top universities in England and elsewhere, Germany or otherwise, we are looking at 4 main characteristics, and this is really common in terms of the application expectations or candidate profile that the admission committees are looking for. Number 1 is academic excellence. And how can we show that and not tell? Okay, there's a rule in application world called show, don't tell. How do we show our academic excellence in our application package? Well, we're talking about obviously grades, your transcript. You want to have a high score in your undergrad studies. And this can differ because some people come to me and say, you know what, I graduated with 91% in my undergrad. Is that good enough to get in? There's no complete rule of thumb. It's not an exact science. But I would say that you want to have, at least 90% and ideally over 94 if you're applying to the really competitive stuff, especially for scholarships. On the other hand, I've had clients who, have 90% or slightly under, and got into really great places because the rest of their package was really strong. You know, incredible references. They did really well on their GRE, for example. So this is a really good point to say that if you're lacking a little bit of strength in one of these components, particularly academic excellence, working hard to get a very, very good test score, such as Gmat, GRE, Toefl, that becomes even more important. Because at the end of the day, it's a holistic pie or package. They look at all the various components, and it's not a single one that will determine yes or no. More in academic excellence, if you've got scholarships in the past, if you participated or were accepted to special programs, all those kind of elements need to come into your application story for the reader to tick the box of academic excellence. Number 2, leadership. You don't all have to be applying to leadership type degrees. Okay, so master's in public policy, MBA, maybe you're going to do a completely scientific degree, something in biotech or, okay, in, I don't know, psychology. Maybe you don't have, quote unquote, typical leadership, a typical leadership track record, but if you are able to demonstrate that you have taken the lead in the world you come from, whether it's through publishing, thoughts, okay, maybe you're a thought leader, maybe you have a blog, maybe you've organized people at the community level, at your university level. Try and think back when you map your story and look at what have you done that can go under this rubric of leadership. And this is important because at the end of the day, it reflects the kind of candidate you are, the kind of student peer you will be, and eventually alum of the institution. So that's another very important quality. If you founded stuff, you know, entrepreneurship is something pretty big nowadays that they're looking for. But in general, taking the lead, going after something that you believe in and making it happen and taking others with you. So examples of that. Third, character. And this is a little subtle because leadership kind of connects to this. But what I mean here is that admissions committees are looking to see that you have some kind of devotion to a cause or a talent. For some of you, it will be more of a cause. Maybe you're interested in, you know, in climate change, or I don't know, human trafficking, and you've done something. And it's not just the line about, you know, I volunteered in this and this school or organization. I'm talking about something that really runs as an underlying current in your story. And try and think, what is that thing that characterizes you? In terms of a commitment, a devotion to something. It can also be a talent. Perhaps you're an amazing basketball player or musician. And this is something that alongside what you want to study academically really characterizes you and has shaped your character. So bring that to the forefront in your application. And lastly, and it's spelled out here as is written in the Gates specific criteria for applicants, but I would say that this in various wordings is apparent in again, the top schools, top scholarships. Service. Gates calls it commitment to improving the lives of others. So the Gates Scholarship at Cambridge, this is one of the pillars of the applicant profile that they look for. But again, I think this is something that's very telling and is sought after. Seeing how you're able to, or what you have done for other people. And it doesn't have to be I volunteered for X hours in this particular orphanage. It can be service in many kinds of ways. Okay, so think what you have done for the betterment, for the improvement of the lives of others, maybe even professionally, maybe it's through your job. Okay, but how can you show or shine the torch on that aspect in your story? These are very important elements of the story that you share in your application. If you have questions, by the way, write them down. We'll have a whole section for Q&A, so we can come back to a lot of these points. Briefly, what is the application timeline like? When should you start? How long does this take? So I like to look at it in a seasonal way. Typically, rule of thumb, you apply a year before you're planning to actually study. So right about now, you're interested in applying in order to study in the autumn of 2022. And so round about spring or end of spring, beginning of summer, which is now, you want to start researching and then deciding where to apply. I like to build with my clients an Excel, which I call the application grid. And we really list there the various applications, where are you applying to, whether it's a scholarship or program, the URL, what are the components you need to submit, the actual essay prompts, and the deadline, of course. And I work back from that and create an actual work plan. So that's a lot of research that you guys need to do by talking to people who've been there. Social media is great in that regard. You can, through LinkedIn, usually reach people who've graduated from the places that interest you, and feel free to reach out. Usually they'll answer. I get a lot of people asking me about my experience at Cambridge, regardless of application shine, and I'm happy to chat with them. Look through the websites, understand what program nuances interest you, think about costs, locations, all the various decision drivers, but do that round about now so that you can, in the autumn, start meeting the deadlines for applying. And the application deadlines vary. So the earliest one for grad school, for masters, is the Fulbright Scholarship, usually around July, and that's a scholarship to fund almost any masters in the US. So that's one of the earlier ones, but typically they're around mid to late autumn. We're talking November, December, beginning of winter. That's the time where you actually have to submit. You want to give yourself a good 3 months to work on your various applications and do all the tests that you need to do, which Avi will talk about very soon. Then towards the end of autumn, and during winter, so around, again, depending on where you're applying, but typically around January, February, you'll be interviewed. That will be the next stage after you submit your application package, and successful candidates will then get admitted, or you'll get your answer in general, typically around about the end of March. In spring, admission answers come and everyone's very excited and stressed, and hopefully you get the result you sought. So that comes full cycle, and then it starts all over again because answers are given, and then the new cycle begins for those who are applying for the upcoming year. And once you get your answer, you're starting in the autumn of that year. What does the application package look like? And some key tips on major components here. So let's pay attention. We are talking about 3 main parts of your application, or components of your application package. The first, and I would say the heavyweight one, is really the personal statement / essays. So an MBA, a master's in business, for example, degree, will require typically shorter essays, around 250 words per essay. It can range from 4 to 6 essays, depends which school, versus other master's or PhD applications that require a solid 1,000-word personal statement, oftentimes alongside research or study objectives essay, which is also between 750 and 1,000 words. So you're looking at quite a bit of writing, and that's where I like to invest a lot of time, because I think that's your chance to really tell your story before an interview and to really make it to the next stage. We've got the CV, which is, again, some people think, oh, that's just a technicality, we'll leave it to the end. The CV is an important part of how you frame your story. There's a whole know-how, a world of, theory on how to do a proper CV, how to write it, how to present your information. People tend to fall down this trap of making it very list form type and chronological and focusing on dates, and a bit boring, but there's some tips I'll give you on that as well. Third, you need standardized tests. Okay, so your test scores for grad school, we're typically talking Gmat, GRE, Toefl, or Ielts, and Avi will elaborate there. You have references, okay, so your recommendation letters, typically 2 or 3, sometimes 4. Sometimes you have to submit 2 and then 1 is optional, and they'll typically be a combination of a professional essay, someone you've worked under or with, and an academic reference, so a former professor of yours. And lastly, the transcripts. That's the easy part, because it is what it is. Okay, so you need to just go to your university, get your grades from your undergrad, usually have them stamped and sent. So there's, again, you need to leave enough time there to do it properly and on time. So a few tips. The personal statement / the essays. I have an entire session of 1 hour, an hour and a half on how to do this. So if I had to really distill the 4 key points, these are what they are. You want to write this statement in the first person. This is not a biography, okay, like a short bio or something. It is not Noa is such and such. Okay, it's I am, I have, I was, etc. First person makes the reader closer to you. That's the standard practice. Second recommendation here. Instead of writing a chronological story, which a lot of people tend to do, so I was born in Jerusalem and spent X years developing my career in that space. Then I studied international relations and went on to, and it becomes this sort of evolving flat story. Instead of doing that, try and structure your essay in distinct paragraphs. So typically an introduction, a few body paragraphs, 3, 5, depending on how many words you have, and a conclusion, where each paragraph sets across one key message. It opens with a topic sentence that says this message in a nutshell. And the rest of the paragraph elaborates with examples and information that validates your message. So if one of my messages is communicating my assets as a leader and entrepreneur, then I need to state that and then show, not tell, how I qualify. So I will talk about my key leadership experiences with a lot of color and storytelling and facts, because I want to be memorable. I want to stick in the minds of the reader and not just talk wishy-washy superlative words about myself. And the kind of messages you can use in your essay typically revolve around your goal. So what you want to achieve in this world, the why that drives you. Why are you applying to do this program? What's the end goal you're aiming at? What impact do you want to bring to the world? And your assets. So each paragraph can be around an area of the assets you bring as a candidate to your peers, to the world. Okay, what are you good at? What makes you stand out? Based on what should they accept you, in other words. So that's in terms of content and structure. You want to have short paragraphs. So I would say typically 7 lines, something like that, can be 10 lines, or much shorter, or sort of depending on your style of writing as well, but not sort of half a page, boom, text, because people lose interest in that. And I said 1 message per paragraph. Of course, show, don't tell, we talked about that. For your CV, a lot here. I'll just say perhaps the biggest tip is that research shows that when people scan your CV, sort of they look at it in the 6 seconds they give you, they usually do it, the eye follows the letter capital F in English, meaning that they'll read the top oblong, which you can use to share your profile, for example, rather than spend the first section on your personal details, which often people do. Date of birth, ID number, address, you don't need all that. Okay, so use the first area in the CV, that oblong, to put across you in a nutshell. And then the eye scans down the CV on the left side if it's a CV in English. And so what the eye picks up are the key words that are written on the leftmost column. What do we oftentimes have there, mistakenly? Dates, years, right? 2002 to 2005, and we'll usually bold them as well, or a lot of people do. And that's a mistake because that's not interesting. It needs to be in the CV, but it can go on the other side. I like to construct the CV in a table with 2 columns, the dates part being on the right, and then I can focus the eye on key actions that tell my story. So under each milestone, I'll have key verbs, power verbs like initiated, led, managed. Okay, under each thing or milestone professionally or academically I did in my track record. So that's, again, very, very fast and very briefly, but that's a major tip for the CV. Put the dates on the other side, hide your table, construct a table and then hide it at the end. Everything gets aligned nicely, and make sure that you capture the reader's eye to focus on the important stuff. And lastly, a note on references. So clients often ask me, Noa, should I get someone who's a bigger name, like the president of my country that I met once at an event I was in, or should I get a referee that is someone who knows me more intimately, that I've worked with, that can really attest to my value, experience, assets? And the answer is you want to aim for somewhere in the middle. So yes, it's important to have a name whose credentials are relevant. So, the higher ranking they are in the organization, if it's the CEO, it's probably better than someone who's your peer. But you need to balance that with having someone who can really talk about you and what you bring. So again, it's case specific, and we'll usually have a discussion about who's the best person to choose. But you want to make sure the person can actually show, not tell, real evidence and anecdotes that showcase the things you're telling about yourself in terms of assets. Okay, so from working with Noa, I experienced that she really does shine in such and such, and give these examples to prove it. And not everyone who's a big name can necessarily say that. Ideally, you want to have the highest ranking person you can in your record to say those more intimate familiarity kind of stuff. All right. So that's in terms of tips. And lastly, before I pass on to Avi, I wanted to say a couple of words about some of the major global scholarships out there. And so first, you need to understand that there are scholarships that are specific to a university, like the Knight Hennessy Scholarship at Stanford. So that's to study pretty much any master's degree, but at Stanford. Okay, and there are various ones like this. I'm giving a sample here. Or you have scholarships which are per country. So for example, the Fulbright Scholarship is like the Chevening Scholarship in England. Fulbright is the US Embassy's scholarship for almost any master's in the US. Okay, so they don't fund programs like in medicine and physiotherapy that involve sort of physical contact with others, something like that. There's a whole definition of it, but typically most degrees will be funded for masters. And then you can choose which university, or there's a track where they place you at university and then fund the full scholarship. So you need to understand the nuances as well. I'll say that again because it needs to be clarified. For the Fulbright Scholarship for masters in the US, you can either get full funding, but then they help you decide where to actually go study in the US, which university, or you say, I'm definitely going to, for example, Berkeley. And in that case, you'll probably not get the fullest funding. So there's two tracks to choose from there. But you first have to apply and get in, and then the whole discussion about tracks starts anyway, so that's okay. Chevening, same idea in the UK, or similar idea. Chevening funds master's degrees pretty much for any kind of degree in most UK universities. There's a list, but the big ones qualify. And then you get the Gates and Rhodes scholarships, which are kind of parallel, one at Cambridge, one at Oxford. And I myself won the Chevening scholarship, but also won Gates and chose to become a Gates scholar to do my MBA at Cambridge. So happy to answer questions about that. I think for me, the biggest tip regarding this part is to say that when I applied, knew I had to get a scholarship. Otherwise, there was no way I could fund this kind of opportunity. And I did a lot of research to figure out what's out there. I actually found Gates. This was back in 2010. I found this through a Google search. I put in MBA, Cambridge, women, something like that, thinking of, my own characteristics, Israeli. And this is one of the Google searches that came up. I hadn't heard about it before. And I applied. And today, a lot of information is out there in a more organized way. You can look at my website. I have clusters of scholarships per geography, per degree. So you can use that. And there are other engines much more robust that you can take tips from. And of course, ask people who've studied in these places through your network, through your network's network. You can get information there. The biggest impediment to getting in, okay, so the biggest reason why you won't get in is that you will disqualify yourself and say, I won't apply because there's no chance I'm going to get in. We're talking less than 2% here. No way. No. If one of these opportunities strikes you as relevant, go for it. Apply. Because that's already setting you apart from a lot of your potential competitors who disqualify themselves with those kind of thoughts. And I have to say, especially women. Okay, so we tend to say, there's no chance. Not going to happen. Surprise yourself. Apply. What can happen? You might actually get in. So thank you for that. And I am going to pass on to Avi to talk about preparation for the standardized tests. and then we'll open up to questions.
Thank you, Noa. All right, hi everybody. The world of standardized tests is a mess right now, following the year we've all just had. University across the United States especially waived, some of them, many even, waived requirements for various tests. Unfortunately for me, but not unfortunately for you. Some, the most wanted ones, Ivy League ones and first year ones still, most of them still require the tests that we are going to discuss. So the only thing to remember is that there's nothing standardized about requirements for standardized testing. I mean, you should check out per school, per university, what the requirements are when you before you apply. So you'll know, so you won't take any tests that you don't need to, but on the other hand, that you won't miss out on tests that you are required to take. So let me share my screen. I think that I can share my screen. Noa, can I share my screen? Okay.
Sorry, my bad. I'm on mute as well.
No
I'm saying
problem,
I have to
no
make you
problem.
host. 1 second.
Yeah, it's
Make host. There you go. Now you
Zoom
can.
is
Sorry about that.
A surprise. All right, let's try it now.
Does it work?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So can you see my screen now? Yeah. Okay, Mariana,
Perfect.
thank you. All right, so I'm gonna talk about. All right, I'm gonna talk about like two. We're gonna make two types of comparisons because most probably if you apply, if you studied most of your years in school in a country where English is not the first language, you're going to be required to take an English as a second language or as a foreign language test, an English proficiency test. So this is one type of test we're going to discuss. But first off, we're going to talk about two tests that you may be required to take, the GRE versus the Gmat. So two tests for grad school, the Gmat specifically for MBA programs. If you're not interested in an MBA, then you shouldn't care about the Gmat. The GRE, more popular, as you can see, over double the number of test takers per year take the GRE, for the simple reason that the GRE is required for most master's and doctoral programs also that are not MBAs, but the GREs became even more popular in recent years since MBA programs started to allow candidates to take the GRE instead of the Gmat, and we'll talk about the differences and why this and not that and so on. So, so a little bit about the two tests in general. Well, the cost you can see. Both tests are administered around the world, and both of them, since April of last year, are also available as online home edition tests. So there's no need to, pick a date like a month from now and then, take the bus, wear the mask, catch a disease and so on. You can simply take the test from home, and that's true for both these tests. They both have home editions now. They started out as like a temporary solution, but they extended this temporary solution again and again until they both decided that it's going to be a permanent solution. You can still take the test at the test center if you'd like, but fewer and fewer people choose this option for obvious reasons. The tests are, by the way, they're the same no matter where you take them, at home or at the test center. So take that under consideration. A little bit about what's going on in each of these tests. I'll start with GMAT. The GMAT has 4 parts, but only 2 of them are really important. The quantitative, or math in simple English, and the verbal, or English. They're both about an hour long each, and they are both computer adaptive, which means that the computer will decide the order the questions are going to be given in, and the difficulty of the questions as you go along. It's not predetermined. So there's a lot to consider regarding which questions you need to get right, which you can guess, and so on and so forth. 2 other sections which are less important but are still part of the test: an analytical writing assessment, which is 3 big words for like an essay, and 350 to 400 word essay, and integrated reasoning, which is the newest part of them all, also not too new, began at 2012, and it's kind of a mix of quant and verbal together. Schools, MBA programs, they mostly care about the quant score and your verbal score, which together, only these 2 account for your total GMAT score. So this is the GMAT. The GRE, a little bit different, starts with 2 essays that are important for most schools that require GRE. And then it's not a single section of each kind like it is on the GMAT. You have 2 verbal sections, 2 math sections, and another unscored section that can be either verbal or math. So 5 sections in total. GRE is also adaptive, but unlike the GMAT, it's not adaptive on the single question level, but it is adaptive on the section level. So you need to get the first section of math and verbal to do it really well, so that you'll get a second section that's harder, but that makes your score go up instead of down. The GRE is a longer test as you can see, but they're both very long, so that doesn't really matter. Once you pass the 3-hour mark, you can see straight whichever test you take. All right, what else about these 2 tests? A little bit about scoring. I won't get into that too much, but as I said, for the GMAT, the 2 main parts, quant and verbal, the score go on a scale of 6 to 51. That's more for the quant. The verbal, the real highest score you can get is 47 or 48. Not many people, very few people get more than that, because the test is adaptive. So it is designed in a way that so you won't be able to get all questions correctly, even if you're very good. The two scores, the verbal and the quant, they mix them up and put them on another scale, because why not? And then you get a score that goes between 200 and 800 to get into good MBA programs. I don't know if there are other good MBA programs, but the ones that everybody wants to get into, you want a GMAT score that has a 7 in the beginning. It doesn't mean that you can't get in with a 6 in the beginning, but it's going to be much harder to do. So 710, 720, 730 GMAT scores are they are in 10-point intervals. So these are the scores you want to get. As for the GRE, verbal and quant scores are on a scale of 130 minimum to 170 maximum for some reason. And so the combined score is actually the combined score. And so you want to get something around, as you can see, 320 something, or even 330 out of a maximum of 340, if you'd like to get into those programs that everybody want to get into. All right, a bit about, so which test should you pick? As I said, if you're applying for grad school, anything that's, any program that's not an MBA, then Gmat is probably not required. It's not for you. You're probably going to have to take the GRE anyway. If you're going for an MBA, you'll be able to choose. And so let's talk a little bit about some of the main differences. First of all, math. I won't go over everything here. You'll get the slides, the recording, so you'll be able to go over this. But simply put, math on the GRE is easier than math on the Gmat. So that's one consideration. People who dislike math, I don't know who they are, but I heard that I've heard of some. Then those people usually tend to prefer the GRE. Math tends to be simpler there. Okay, there should have been another slide here, but I'll say that the other slide was saying that as for verbal or English, both tests are difficult, but they're difficult in different ways regarding English. GRE, verbal sections, they rely a lot on vocabulary. And when I am saying vocabulary, I'm talking about words that nobody's ever heard of. Even if you are a native English speaker, part of what it takes to prepare well for the GRE verbal is to sit at home or wherever you are and increase your vocabulary with those terrible GRE type words. The Gmat, on the other hand, doesn't test vocabulary directly, but it does test your knowledge of English grammar and various aspects of formal writing, not only on the essay section, but on the verbal section. I mean, through questions we'll see in a bit. All right, so to see what I mean by that, let's take a few examples. So here's an example for a question that could appear on either test. Read it and answer it, but answer using the chat so you won't spoil it. By the way, what's an integer? An integer is another word for a whole number, not a fraction. Let's see who's gonna answer first. I have an answer already, but is it the right answer? By the way, the time per question on the Gmat math is 2 minutes, and on the GRE math, it's minute 45. You don't have a time per question restriction, but that's the average time per question. So which of these 5 numbers cannot be a divisor of y? Y cannot be divided into which of these 5? If it is equal to 3x plus 2. Here's your hint, plus 2. All right, so I have no clue, Mariana says. All right, so Mariana and everybody, 3x plus 2 is something that you cannot divide by 3. Why is that? Because 3x is something that's divisible by 3, right? It's a multiple of 3. And if you take a multiple of 3 and add 2 to it, you're going to end up with something that you cannot divide by 3 anymore. And since you cannot divide y by 3, you cannot divide it by any other multiple of 3, such as 6. So Eyal had the right answer in a few seconds. So very good, Eyal. All right. So this is for the first example. What about English? So English is different on, well, math is also different, but some of the questions are alike. English is very different. So here's an example for a GRE verbal question of a type. There are a few types, but a type called text completion, or you may know it as sentence completion. It's the same idea. This is what I talked about when I said, you know, words that you may have never heard of. All right, so what's the right word to describe this job market? And I didn't mean to bring you down with this sentence. But, all right, I can't pronounce the name, but I have an answer. Could you tell me how to pronounce the name?
You mean Jyoti?
Jyoti. Jyoti? Something like that. All right, so I have an answer. Anybody else? Oh, so I have 3 answers already, and everybody seems to agree. No, not everybody seems to agree. 2 of you said anemic, and 1 of you said titular. Noah, help us out here.
Are you serious?
I don't know. I don't know. I may be.
A job market could be anemic.
It could be anemic.
It could be anemic,
right?
But there are not many opportunities there. It's very sort of
it's weak,
tired
right?
and weak. Yeah,
Very
there are
good.
not a lot of openings, so people are going back to grad school.
Very good. So whoever said anemic got it right. Most of you did. Whoever answered, so very good. An anemic job market. You know, when a person is anemic, then well,
they lack iron.
He lacks iron in the blood, so he or she, they're pretty weak. And the job market can also be weak and with not many opportunities. But what's titular, by the way? Titular from the word title, right? Refers to the what something is called or named. So that's not right for our context. All right, I think that we're running out of time, and thus I'm gonna run through quickly over English proficiency tests. And we have many English proficiency tests. I'm gonna discuss the 2 main ones, the Ielts and the Toefl. And I'm gonna run through my last slide about the differences and why you should pick one and not the other. Well, so everything I'm saying is about to change because Toefl, by the way, has recently announced a change to the format. So what I'm saying here is true about the current format. By the way, the current format is going to continue on. They're going to offer a shortened version because they're under pressure from competitors such as the Duolingo English test that I'm not going to talk about today. But of course, whoever wants to know about it, I'll be happy to answer questions. TOEFL reading, in comparison to IELTS, reading is more difficult on TOEFL. Texts are more difficult. Listening is different in the sense that for TOEFL, you listen first and you answer all questions after you listen. And on Ielts, you see the questions first, and then you answer as you listen. So some people prefer this version, some people prefer the other version. Speaking is very different. On Ielts, you talk to a person, with a person, and on TOEFL, you speak to the computer that asks questions, and you answer in like a certain fixed format. Writing is about the same, except on Ielts, you have more time. So what that means is that the current format of TOEFL versus the current format of IELTS is preferable for most people. Not everybody likes it, but it is British, which is why some people don't like it. And TOEFL is American, but some people prefer the British, but the change in TOEFL is going to be a serious one. The tests that are both about 3 hours long, the new TOEFL, which is called TOEFL Essentials, is going to be like only between, they don't have all the details just yet. They're going to review them as they go along. The test in the new format is going to start on August only, in August, but it's going to be like only an hour to an hour and a half long. So that's going to be a serious change. And I think that, yeah, that'll do. That'll do. I think I'm out of time.
Thank you, Avi.
You're welcome. All right.
Hopefully we've encouraged and not discouraged you to take the test for the tough math question. I would be discouraged. I'm not great on the math stuff.
No, so I'm just gonna say that, all of these tests you can prepare for. That's very important to note. You can prepare for all of these tests. You can improve. It's about getting to know the test and about a lot of practice. That's what it takes. Yep. Even if you're not strong at math, you can do very well on both tests. And I've been doing this for 20 years now, so yeah, I know.
So talk to Avi.
Thank you.
That's the key, because really to check off this part, you need to prepare well and strategically, like with the application package itself, but with the tests, it's really about learning the how to crack it. It's not about being good at math or even good at English. There's a whole technique that you need to learn and practice, and Avi is the guru for that. All right, so in the very little time we have left, we'll go over time a little bit, if that's okay with you, a few minutes, depending on the number of questions. We want to give you a chance to ask or to comment, so feel free. You can raise an electronic hand unless you just want to open your mic and ask. I don't think you're all shouting at once, so feel free to ask and we'll give you a chance to share a question, a query. There are no wrong questions. Everything's legit. This is your chance. And we don't represent formally, disclaimer, any institution, blah, blah, blah. This says, yes, Eyal, go for it. And then Michal. Just unmute yourself, please.
So yes, how does scholarship and acceptance work for a PhD in USA?
What kind of scholarships out there are there, and how does it work? So in terms of the timeline and the package, I talked about similar to masters, with a few nuances. So in terms of your essays and the writing, you'll typically have 1,000 words personal statement, and next to that around 1,000 words or 750 research objectives, and there you have to really showcase your academic background and what you're interested in doing in your PhD. It doesn't have to be super specific, because you're not necessarily supposed to come with a complete idea of what it is exactly you're going to study, but you need to be able to communicate what interests you and why, and how you're going to pursue that. In terms of scholarships for PhD, most places will fund, they'll get funding in order for you to work with a particular professor or in a particular lab, depending on the field you're going into. The PhDs are typically funded by the university itself, less by these external scholarship programs like Gates, Rhodes, etc. Although I have to say in England, Gates and Rhodes specifically do fund masters or PhD. So I know a lot of people who did their masters, for example, at Cambridge on the Gates scholarship, and then went on to pursue their PhD as well. Or you can land directly into the PhD program with such a scholarship. For the US particularly, we're talking about funding per department, per professor who gets funding to bring on board PhD students, which is why it's very important as a PhD candidate to connect with professors of interest to you and do your research and try and meet them in, on a webinar or on a Zoom and try and sort of establish that mutual interest or relationship so that can help your application as well. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
Sure. Michal.
I have a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
First one, you explained about Fulbright. First of all, that they don't do everything that has to do with the medicine. And also from what I understood, they make you go back to your country after that, some sort of a contract. So where can I find more scholarships except for, normal Google? Like, is there any source that you could recommend?
Mm-hmm. So first I would look at the particular universities you're applying to. Do you know where you're going to apply?
SFSU, San Francisco.
Okay, so I would really do proactive outreach and email the admissions committee. Obviously look at the website and they'll typically have the information there, but I would proactively send a short email, a strategic one, not just asking about, are there any scholarships, a short paragraph, which is your first impression, right, of you, and communicate your story in brief. I sometimes help people, create that first email outreach, but the point is to seek proactively scholarship money or additional funding. And you can explain your situation. I know nothing about you or your story, but to find sort of the hook of why it could be interesting for them to fight for you and to help you find scholarship money to do this program. So that's one. So email the admissions committee, look on social media, see if you can find people who studied there and then what they're doing today. Perhaps there's some kind of corporate sponsorship you can dig up, and then the Google search. You need to go about the Google search in a strategic way as well. There are some engines there like scholarships for dev. That's like for development, but they have a lot of scholarships for many topics. That's a pretty good one. If you email me, I can send you some ideas on where to search. But I think the best way for US master's funding is, yes, Fulbright, which is across the board, and then looking at the particular university/program and communicating with a real person there who can help guide you.
Also, because I know that a lot of scholarships, they don't give it to they don't give it to international students, only to residents in the US.
There's a lot of nuances and it will depend. And there are scholarships through embassies in general to study abroad. So when I was doing my MBA, one of my options was Switzerland. And I, randomly looked at the Swiss embassy's website in Israel, and I ended up actually applying and getting a scholarship there to go. But I didn't pursue it. But it's thinking sort of creatively who might be a relevant stakeholder to fund you. So that's a sort of mapping work you need to do. Regarding coming back, there are scholarships, including Chevening, by the way, for England, that require you to state a commitment to returning to your home country after the degree. Sometimes it's, if you do an LLM, for example, it's not immediately after. They give you a year to stay in the US. It really depends, and it's something that can change year by year, and you have to make sure you know the updated details. So that's usually available again on their website or by calling them up and verifying.
Thank you. And two small questions, sorry. The Toefl Essentials, I think I missed it a little bit. Avi, you talked about it. Is it something that's going to replace the Toefl that's now, or?
No, it's going to be like another option. But, I'm guessing that once it starts, it's going to start in August, by the way. Whoever needs to take the Toefl until then, in June and July, it's only, the current format. But I'm guessing, what I'm guessing is that as they go along, the new format is going to replace the old one, because nobody wants to take a 3-hour test when they can take a 1-hour test. So that's
okay,
it. Yeah.
Thank you. And last question, the application shine that you talked about it. Is it it's a service. It gives like it's with you from the start until you apply, or like how much does it cost? How, you know?
So I'll explain. I work with candidates who are applying across the board to any kind of program, scholarship. I specialize in the more competitive ones, and the process is tailor-made. So in terms of how many hours it will take to work on a full application, typically on average, we're talking for a full, A to Z application, we're talking between 10 and 15 hours, usually. It can differ person to person, and then it would depend, by all means contact me and we can look at exactly what it is you might need and price it accordingly. But what I do have is also free information on my website. I'll actually put that in the chat right now, applicationshine.com, and you can access, for example, scholarships there for various degrees in various locations. You can have free tips on how to write your CV. So there's quite a few, there's a sort of small blog there, and you can get some tips there as well. Yeah, but it's a service, it's an A to Z service for supporting your application, apart from the test prep, which is why this webinar is a collaboration between Avi and myself. I am not the person to go to for test prep stuff. I don't deal with that. We have the experts with us here. So all GMAT, GRE, etc. related questions to Avi.
We're going to send an email tomorrow, by the way, everybody. So we're going to put in the links to our both our websites and to everything you need to know.
Perfect.
So that's and the link to the recording also of
Super.
The webinar.
Great. Mariana.
Yeah, thank you for making time after the postponement to actually have the session. Very appreciated. You mentioned in those like 4 main components on when you're filling an application, what do they look at? You mentioned service, and I also remember that from the last session when we stopped, you also mentioned that it's not necessarily like that small voluntary work that you do a bit there and then you do a bit there, and then now you also mentioned that, for example, it could even be like professionally related, what's something that you do also in your work. And I was wondering if you could give some more like specific examples of what it could actually be.
Mm-hmm. So when we say service, we tend to think of volunteer work, but as I said, it doesn't have to be. So for instance, I'll talk about my own story. When I applied to do the MBA, I came from about 6 years of what we call peace building experience. So I'd worked in various NGOs that bring together Israelis and Palestinians through dialogue, through collaborative projects, through education. And for me, that was a way to help improve the lives of others, in the sense that applying again to the Gates Scholarship, because what I was doing is practically trying to create a different reality here in the region. And the service to others was through my day job, which was to organize programs and projects in the educational space, in the cultural space, at an NGO called the Paris Center for Peace. And I was a department manager there, and I talked about concrete examples of how I was fulfilling my goal of building a different kind of Middle East through the work I was doing there. And that could fall under the rubric of serving others or helping improve the lives of others. Mm-hmm. I'll say that this is especially true for scholarship applications. Okay, if you're going to go and study engineering at MIT, it's not super essential perhaps that you focus, it's more important you show academic excellence, leadership, entrepreneurship, perhaps innovative thinking. The serving others or helping improve the lives of others might be a nice to have. So it depends also on where exactly you're applying and for what. But by and large, for scholarship funding, it's kind of like a return on investment. So you're getting money. They need to see that this money is going in not just to make you a richer, more, happier person. They want to make sure that there's going to be an ROI, a return on their investment, and that you're going to give back. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Someone who hasn't asked before, Eyal?
Yeah, actually, I'd love to ask too.
Diana.
Hey, thanks. So I have 2 questions. Like the first one is, I did a GRE, and I'm not sure if I should retake the test. So is there any like tool or something that I convert my GRE score to Gmat score just to know where I'm studying? And my second question is, like, obviously, I want to do an MBA, and I'm thinking of obviously Ivy League, and so like something in that level, but I'm also like realistic, and I'm thinking of other like first-year universities and some safety schools. So where could I find those schools for an MBA, and how to know like the difference between them? Because I'm not really like super aware of them, and I'm not sure if I would have the opportunity to go visit on campus because of all the COVID situation around the world.
Okay, Noa, you go first.
So wait, so I understood it as a GRE conversion question, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, the first question I didn't get also.
Oh,
so can you recap very in brief, Diana?
Yeah,
the
sure.
Question is how to translate GRE scores to Gmat scores? Would that be
basically, yeah.
Okay, so Avi, do you want to take that first?
Converting GRE to Gmat. I'm gonna send you a link of how to do that, but I will say that that it doesn't really convert very well in the sense that for MBAs, Gmat is if you have a strong Gmat score, that is going to help you in your MBA application process more than like a comparable GRE score, you might say. So,
okay, so
the translation is kind of well, it is kind of useful, but not too much. If your math capabilities are all there, I would say go take the Gmat.
Guys, we'll end in about 3 minutes to respect your time and the time we allocated for this. I just want to respond. So your second question, Diana, if you can just recap briefly.
Yeah, sure. So how can I get to know more safety schools and the difference between them?
When you say safety schools, you mean ones that are easier to get into?
Yeah, like not Ivy League or top tier universities.
So I guess the almost obvious answer is, research and talking to people. There are a lot of, when you do Google search in terms of lists and rankings, and you look at rankings of schools and all that data is online. It just requires, it depends for MBA specifically, there's a lot of consolidated research out there because every year there's reports, in the big magazines and so on the ratings of schools and how many percent students got, what percent students got accepted from applicants and so on. So you can actually gather that data and then figure out yourself based on also what kind of MBA program you're looking at and for. You can figure out what for you would be the safety net, if you like. And it's a very important point when you apply to not only apply to the 5 schools from the top 10, because what happened, you need there's some serendipity here as well. So you need to make sure you have some safety schools in your basket. And I think, there are some websites I can point you to offline, but or we can take it after the call, but it's pretty much, writing school rankings, maybe talking about the specific geography you want, East or West Coast, etc. You need to refine that a bit. But for MBA specifically, the information is very consolidated out there.
Sure, thank you. I will Google it.
You're welcome. Patricia had a question on, should I apply even if I don't meet the full criteria? So that's a really important question. And part of my mission in founding Application Shine was to really help, especially people who tend to disqualify themselves. Okay, so their populations, whether it's minorities or women as a group, which is not a minority at all, but we tend to not apply. That's the experience I've seen, and that saddens me. And I want to make sure that people go for it, even if they don't check, every single box on the list. And the reason is that it really depends on the holistic picture. So perhaps, Patricia, you haven't fulfilled the 2-year work experience requirement because you're missing 3 months because of COVID. If you explain that, there's typically in the application essays, there's usually a place where you can, it's like an optional essay, a short essay where you can explain something. So often people will say something about their English language score, or they'll talk about a particular course in their undergrad where they didn't score so high, and they'll explain why. And so if you have a good reason and you can tell the story well in terms of why you don't completely fill this particular requirement and your other application components are very strong, yes, apply. Same with the test scores. So I know people who got into top tier MBA programs on full scholarship with 650 in their Gmat. It can happen. And even less, too. Don't tell. Yeah, so, but it means they have really strong weights in their favor elsewhere. Super strong references, a really powerful personal statement, a killer personal statement that can compensate for the missing score, if you like, in the GRE. So you need to look at it holistically, very important, and don't be the one to disqualify yourself. Worst case, you spend a few $100s on the application. Worst case. Okay, go for it.